All right, hello everybody. Welcome to those of you who are in this Chess University stream here. Letting the notification go live for the people who are following on Twitch, and gonna just wait a minute or two here to see some people kind of hop into the channel. This is FIDE Master Dalton Frame. Happy to see all of you guys in the chat box here, and I'm looking forward to doing this chess training using students game seminar here today. We're going to be going live, or starting that off in just a moment or so. Hey, Timothy Connolly. Nice to see you. Yep, you can see me. Yep, using a webcam this time. Nice to see you in the chat. Hopefully the audio and video is okay. Should be pretty good. Hey, HWTXP. Nice to see you as well. Just going to wait a little bit here for some people to filter in. And we'll kick off the show in just a second. Nice to see you as well. Nice to see you, HW. Audio video seems fine. Okay, thanks a lot. Appreciate that. I need to also have the chess.com TV chat box open as well here. I think that we're being put in there in just a little bit. Let me see. Yep, I see myself in there. Cool, cool. Should probably have that open on the main monitor. Make sure it's muted. Okay, I see myself there. Thanks a lot for the support there, chess.com. Appreciate that. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and kick off the, I guess, seminar here. Just to introduce myself, for those of you who have not participated in any Chess University things in the past, or maybe never seen me before, my name is Dalton Preen. I'm a FIDE Master, as well as one of the lead instructors and the Director of Instruction for ChessUniversity.com. And today we're going to be doing a chess training using students game seminar brought to you by ChessUniversity.com. So on today's show, we're going to be reviewing some different students' games. There were some games that were submitted to me through email. And we're also going to be mainly learning about a variety of ideas in regards to planning, calculating, throughout the analysis of the different interesting positions that we look at today. Now, the games, like I said, are going to come from some students that have submitted games to me through email, and there's also going to be some games from some of my own private students as well. So kind of a mixture of lots of different rating levels throughout the lesson, or throughout this seminar here today. It's going to be all different rating levels throughout the different games we look at. So throughout the games, there's going to be a couple of main things we're going to be discussing. Each game does kind of have a certain topic or kind of theme that goes along with it. So we're going to be talking about how to create a plan, of building an attack against the opponent's king, and then converting a material advantage once we do gain a material advantage through that attack. We're going to talk about how to use our active pieces in the endgame when we have maybe a worse pawn structure. So we have a good kind of short-term advantage versus a bad long-term advantage, or disadvantage. We're going to talk about how to prevent opponents' counterplay, or how to free up our own position in order to get counterplay. And finally, we're going to talk about how to play down a pawn with compensation coming out of the opening. So I do have a good amount of games here that I want to look through, and the stream will be about an hour, maybe an hour and 15 minutes or so, somewhere around there. So let's go ahead and jump right into our first game example that we're going to be putting here on the board. So in this first game example, we're going to check it out from White's point of view at this point. And let's kind of just go through the opening, and then we're going to get to kind of an interesting position that I wanted to talk about. So the game starts off with kind of a French defense at the start, but then Black plays g6 on move 2, which is definitely not standard here. A little bit weird, but still looking to develop the bishop in a moment. Knight f3, bishop g7, knight c3. White's developing perfectly normal. Black is looking to maybe fianchetto. And in this position, Black plays bishop a6. There's a trade of bishops. And we're going to fast forward just one or two more moves here. For the most part, White is playing perfectly normal moves. Black is solid, but a little bit kind of a weird setup. based on kind of the missing bishop on b7, and we kind of get to this position here. So in this position, it's move number 9. And throughout this lesson, we're going to kind of talking about some different ideas, and I'll have plenty of questions as we go throughout these examples as well. Player ratings, these players were rated in the 1,000 range. It shows white has a rating of 1020, and black is about 1180. So that's the rating range for this particular game here. Yes, I'm a dark horse. I did get your game. And you might see a familiar position on the board right now, actually. I believe this is your game here. Yep. Okay, so from this position here, it's move number 9. And it is white's move at the moment. For those of you watching here, I'm going to have, like I said, plenty of questions that I want you guys to kind of think about, because this is training and learning, not just going through every single move necessarily. What would you be thinking about if you were in white's shoes? It's white's move in this position. What's kind of going through your mind here in this particular example? White to move. I'm not really looking for a specific move necessarily. It's not like there's a tactic or anything like that. Just kind of what's going through your mind in this kind of position here. Okay, Mikloping says one knight's in Bangkok and the world's your oyster. So one knight, especially the one on b4, is a little bit of a weird placement here. It's active, but kind of floating out there, not particularly threatening anything just yet. Nasty potential for a knight c2 fork, Rodolfo says. That is true. We definitely need to keep the c2 square protected. Our queen is guarding it at the moment. But we definitely don't want to play something like queen e3. I mean, we don't want to move away from the protection of c2. That is definitely something to keep an eye on. Knight is loose. That is true. The knight on b4 is, again, kind of on a weird square. Definitely a bit loose. If we move the queen or get careless, you're absolutely correct. Knight to c2 could happen. Okay, so that's a couple of things we notice here. Now, in an overall sense, what do you think, if you're, again, if you're in white shoes here, what would you be looking to do from here? Again, not really specific moves. I mean, maybe, for example, castling is reasonable. But what is kind of your thinking going forward from here? We have a nice position. We got the knights developed to good squares, bishops on a pretty good square. We've got 2 pawns in the center, so we've got extra space. We just kind of have to figure out what's the next, what are we going to work towards going forward. So what might we do, what are some thoughts here in this particular case? Okay, I think he's trying to take his king, so attack maybe. Attacking would make sense in this position. We might talk about that a little bit more in a moment. Tattered Green says e5. Milcham says a3. Getting an outpost for my knight on f6. Okay, so noticing in this position, there are a couple of different ideas that make sense. I do definitely agree with an attack in this position. It's a little bit hard to, make a checkmate threat or anything like that right now. But in positions like this where we have a lead in space, right? We have more space in the center, 2 pawns versus 0 for black. Generally, when you have a lead in space, it's usually a good kind of next step to build an attack against the opponent. The reason that having extra space makes an attack easier to accomplish is because when you have more space, you have more piece mobility, and you can use that mobility to shift over towards the king side or shift over in the direction of the opponent's king, for example. So different things that make sense to do here. I do agree with attacking on the king side. We have to figure out how we're going to build that attack, though. I'm going to assume black is going to castle. He does castle within the next move pretty much. But castling king side is probably where the king's going to go. So we can look to build an attack in that direction of the board probably. Now, the question would be, going forward, how do we do that? what are some things, let's say we fast forward one move. Let's imagine we just castle here, for example. Or a3. Let's say we do a3 and then castle, maybe. Actually, let's leave the knight there. Let's say we castle first. Let's just say this, for example. And let's say the black castles. How might we proceed with our trying to pressure on the center here? Or pressure on the, I think I said center, but pressure on the king side is what I mean. Pressure on the king side here somehow. Or looking to weaken that king up. Can you give the answer? You can give any suggestion you think that would work out. More than happy to take any suggestions. There's not really an answer, but so Maximus says h4. h4 could be an idea. Even if we castle kingside, h4 might still come into play here. Maybe playing the move h4, go for h5, maybe try to take g6 or go to h6 could definitely be an idea at some point. a3 might also be a move to throw in as well. Very true. So we definitely want to attack on the king side. I do think in these kind of situations where the opponent has the bishop that's fianchettoed right in front of the king, probably working towards a bishop exchange. If we can somehow exchange off the bishop on f4 for the one on g7, if this bishop is not on g7 anymore, the king will be a bit weaker. So something like queen e3 or queen d2, obviously not queen e3 now because of the pawn, but maybe something like, a3, kick the knight back, and then queen d2. And then we can try to play bishop h6, and we can try to put some pressure on the king side. Now, the move e5 might come into play here at some point, but there is also some little difficulties to e5 immediately. Let's say we do e5 right away. Let's just kind of examine this real quick. If we go e5 immediately, what are we kind of making available for black? What are we kind of making available for black if we push this pawn up to e5? There are some benefits to this, but there are also some downsides as well. Okay, so in this case, we're kind of giving up the d5 square. Now, that's not actually a humongous deal, because we do have the pawn that can always go to c4 to protect that square in the future. But we are kind of giving black the option of playing something like knight d5 right away. Knight to beat d5, hit the bishop and the knight. If we trade off the knights, maybe we go bishop g5 after that to hit the queen, and maybe black just plays f6 and he looks to trade off our e5 pawn. Something like that might be, reasonable for black. If we take the pawn, the knight takes back maybe, or the bishop takes even. And overall, it's a pretty solid position for black. Black, I think, is doing okay here. We may be able to trade off the dark square bishops, but we kind of lost that extra space. We had 2 pawns in the center, now we only have 1 pawn in the center. So that's a little bit of a negative here. But I do think, though, that trading off the dark square bishops, it makes a lot of sense. So let's say we throw in a3 first, for example. Knight back to c6. Then maybe we go queen d2. Guarding the pawn and going for bishop h6 next move, potentially. And we're looking to pressure on the king side. We might play e5 later, maybe after we trade off the dark square bishops, maybe e5 a little bit later, because our kind of a long-term setup we might look for. Let's imagine we give black a couple of, random moves here. Rook e8, bishop h6, maybe d5 or something. Trade bishops, e5. Something like this is pretty good for white, because we do have control of f6. Maybe we work a knight over into f6. Maybe the queen comes into f6. And then again, the h4, h5 plan of continuing to attack over on the king side. Something like this makes perfect sense for white in this position, I think. Now, in the game, white here chose a bit of a different route. He decided to still attack on the king side, which I think is still the right way to go. But he decided to go for kind of a bit of a knight route, repositioning here. I was thinking about bishop h6, but I thought it slowed my other plans. I think bishop h6 is okay. I don't know if it really slows your other plans, but it is a plan that takes a couple of moves to accomplish. But if you think that, you know, bishop h6 is going to take a few moves, the knight route you decided to do in the game also took a few moves. So it really is just a little bit of a preference thing. I do think trading off this dark square bishop, though, is going to be important for the attack. So in the game, white played knight d1. And where do you guys think this knight's going? What do you think is the reason behind knight d1? Maybe there's a couple reasons, but the knight is looking to reroute somewhere within a few moves, and it's actually not a bad place for the knight to go. We'll kind of see how that works out. So what might the knight be doing? Okay, Calculated Blender says e3 to g4 to f6. Okay, so targeting those dark squares. Again, notice how the way that black is essentially developed in the game here, he is kind of weakening f6 and h6 a little bit, because simply whenever you fianchetto, those two squares are usually a bit weaker for the most part. Plus the knight's also in the way, so the queen's not guarding f6. So this knight route does make sense. I do think this is not a bad idea at all. It just depends on, can black stop it? Right? There might be a way for black to prevent this compared to the other plan we looked at a moment ago of queen d2, bishop h6. You know, it kind of comes down to, can black prevent our plan? You know, versus this original plan we looked at versus this e3 to g4 to f6 plan. So black decided castle. White did play knight e3. Now black played a5. I'm not really sure why black played a5. This is kind of a wasted move, essentially. Let's kind of think about it from black's perspective a little bit. White has just played knight d1 to e3. We kind of have an idea of what the knight's going to do. What do you think that black should be doing here? What do you think black should be doing? Kind of in a general sense. Black's behind on space, and his pieces are not particularly that active. They're not terrible, but they're not, you know, the best pieces in the world either. What do you think black should be looking to do here? Kind of in a general sense, once again. Attacking the center. f5, he's got a hanging knight. He does have a hanging knight, but it's not really, white can't really take advantage of that, unfortunately. Maybe move the knight back, though, at some point to c6 would be safe. So f5, c5, he needs to look after that hanging knight or it's gone. So I do think that f5 or c5 are going to be important moves to play here. Essentially, the main idea behind both of these moves is that you're attacking your opponent's center. Whenever you're behind in space, whenever you're the side that has less space than your opponent, and they have more space, you usually want to try to attack the center, you want to pressure one of the two pawns, in this particular case, e4 or d4. And f5 and c5 both do that. c5 hits d4 and f5 hits e4. Other moves that also would attack the center would be things like d5. e5 is not really possible right now. I'm not crazy about d5 because white, again, can lock things up and get that f6 square. The difference with f5, for example, versus d5 is that even if white plays e5 here, you still have that d5 square. You haven't blocked that up. You can now play knight d5. And then, black is kind of trading pieces and untangling a bit. So I do think from black's perspective here, a move like f5 makes a lot of sense. You're attacking the center. If white trades pawns, well, then he has one less pawn in the center. We'll just capture back with probably the knight, so we can trade a few pieces. If white pushes forward, then we get access to d5 like we saw. I think c5 is also possible as well. So we play c5, attacking d4. White might play c3 to protect the pawn. Maybe we real quick go ahead and take and hit his knight. So if he takes our knight, we take his knight, and that's a trade of pieces. So he takes back, maybe we play now f5 again, or knight to c6. Again, we're looking to continue pressuring the center. So that's kind of what black should be working to do. White, though, is going to try to maintain his center and try to attack on the king side. At the end of the day, though, the move that black played in the game, which was a5, really just doesn't do any of that. Why not c5? Oh, Rodolfo, I think c5 would be fine as well. I was kind of showing both of them. I was focusing a little more on f5, but I think c5 would be fine as well, because you get the pressure of the d4 pawn. So, yeah, c5 and f5 both perfectly good. Black, though, played a5, which doesn't do anything about the center. So not a very good move here. White continues with his knight g4 idea, looking to maybe play bishop h6 or knight h6. Now Black does play f5 finally, so this was a better late than never kind of thing for Black to do. After f5, White went ahead and took on f5, and I think that Black should simply take back with the knight. And White has a little bit less control of the center, but White can still play something like bishop e5, trade off the bishops. And I think White might still have some attacking possibilities on the king side. I do think, though, this is probably Black's best defensive or best kind of way to get back in the game. But at the end of the day, I think White's still pretty happy with the extra space, the bad knight on b4, and maybe White still plays like h4, h5, and looks to attack as the game goes on. In the game, though, Black didn't even take the pawn back, which was kind of weird, I felt. And he played rook to c8. Yeah, and knight f5 also guards h6. Definitely correct there, Timothy. Now, Black played rook to c8. I'm not really sure about this move. I guess it guards the c7 pawn, but, I mean, he probably should just take back on f6 or on f5 here. What would you do in White's shoes? We can't really take on e6 or g6 because the bishop on f4 is behind that pawn. This pawn is actually kind of pinned. But what might we be able to do differently in this position here? Is c3 okay? Yeah, c3 might be okay. I think a different move is better after rook c8 here, as we're going to see. But let's kind of see what other options we might have after this kind of rook c8 move. I think c3 is okay, but there is a different move I like a little more here. So c3 is one option, but maybe something else. Again, focusing on the side of the board that we're kind of prioritizing here. So Jay Bolden says bishop e5, f6 immediately, knight e5, castle. So a couple different move options here. The move that I think is the best at this point, is the move f6. And the main reason here is we're going to lose this pawn anyways, right? We can't maintain this pawn. We're not going to keep an extra pawn here. But what we can do here is give the pawn up in a way that's going to benefit us. You did play f6 a little bit later. You're definitely correct about that. But by giving Black the opportunity to fix... well, we'll look at f6 a little later, but I think we could play f6 right now. Pretty much Black has to take it. I think Black should, take the pawn. Knight takes with check, rook takes back. And maybe now we just play like bishop g5, rook f8. Maybe now we play c3 or knight e5. Or we have different options at this point. I think maybe c3, knight moves, knight e5, h4, h5. We're still looking to pressure the king side is definitely our main plan here once again. What's the main benefit we've already accomplished here, though? What have we accomplished by playing that f6 move? What have we accomplished with this? Oh, Timothy, I think the thing went in the chat twice there because I think it's part of the filter a little bit. Maybe there's particular words that sometimes get a little bit caught up in the auto mod filter. Like I'm not the one filtering it, but I think there's like an automated filter sometimes. Yeah, I mean, what you said was perfectly fine, though. So we got rid of the dark square bishop. Looks like White's controlling the center. Black lost the dark square bishop, and there's a gaping hole in the kingside pawn structure. Yeah, so that's the main thing here. We were able to trade off the dark square bishop without even losing our dark square bishop, which is like a double positive, pretty much. We got rid of the bishop, plus we still have our own bishop. So we have good attacking chances, like we showed, something like this, h4, h5. I mean, White's looking pretty happy in a position like this, I would say. So the main thing is, though, by not playing f6 right away, in the game White castled, Black could have just now played knight takes f5. He could have fixed his mistake pretty much. And now we still have to work a little bit harder to get rid of that bishop. So I think f6 immediately is probably the best move. In fact, I'm positive that's the best move, I would say. But You do eventually get to play it. Black kind of, for some reason, doesn't take the f5 pawn. And then now you played f6. So now white played f6, and he kind of was able to get that going there. Now, again, though, after the bishop takes, I'll probably just go ahead and take on f6. By playing bishop h6, black could have played bishop g7, maybe. Well, maybe it doesn't work out here, I guess. We can trade and get queen e5 check. So I guess bishop h6 was fine. The rook moves, you take on f6, and then queen e5. So it looks like a very nice position. Yeah, I'm not sure why your opponent didn't take back on f5 either. I really have no good guess at that. But notice how here we're creating mating threats. If the rook moves to the wrong square, we go to g7 and get checkmate. So black played knight f5, guarding the rook and attacking the bishop. But now white simply plays bishop g5 with the pin, and white is going to win the exchange, and white's going to be up material. So probably the best defensive move here. What do you guys think would be a better move than knight f5? Because knight f5 does allow bishop g5. What might be a better defensive move here? Let's flip it to black's side of the board. I think black could have untangled here a bit, but he has to figure out the right way to do things. I thought he only had king f7. King f7 is actually probably worse than knight f5, I would say. If black goes king f7, how does white continue with the attack? Pretty straightforward for white here. Yeah, now we just go knight g5 check. The king has to move backwards. You take the rook, and the game is over there, right? This is game over. 2 checkmate threats, and black might as well resign. So king f7 doesn't work. Rook f5 doesn't work either because still white has the queen g7 checkmate. So black has to figure out some way of protecting the rook, because that is a threat. In the game he played knight f5. Rook f7 doesn't really work either. Rook f7 does guard the mate, but still kind of runs into knight g5 issues. Now we're going to take the rook, which is protecting the checkmate. Knight to d5. Knight d5 may be possible. Knight d5 does protect the rook and keep it there. But maybe now white plays c4, attacking the knight that's guarding the rook. Black has to kind of counterattack here and stuff like that. He has to be a bit careful. The best defense here that I see is knight to c6. This opens up the defense of the rook by the queen. So now there's no queen takes f6 happening. And you're also, whoops, get rid of those arrows. And you're also attacking the queen at the same time. So it's just pretty much a counterattacking idea here. You defend the threat, and you counterattack the queen. And the tricky part is that actually the queen has to move. Black is threatening d4, black is threatening c2, and black is threatening the queen. There's actually not a good way to protect everything. If white plays queen e4, trying to guard everything at once, we can now play maybe we can play d5 and push the queen away from something. Now, I think white is still doing pretty well. Bishop g5 is still a threat and stuff like that, so black still has to be a bit careful. But who knows? Maybe something... I'm not even sure if this is that great, but maybe if maybe you sacrifice the exchange, and now you're picking up some pawns. You got rid of the knight. I'm not saying this is best necessarily, but black looks to be getting some counterplay here. He's kind of counterattacking white rather than being stuck in defensive mode. If you do something like this. Now that didn't happen in the game though, as we saw. In the game, white played knight f5, which falls for bishop g5 with the pin. And after king g7, white simply picks up the exchange, and white looks to convert his material lead. And white did a pretty good job of that as the game went on. White played rook to d1, hitting d7. I might have thrown in c3 myself real quick, but I guess knight d3 might happen. But, c3, knight d3, rook here, knight takes, rook takes. Black even has to be careful about, his own king getting mated because he has no safe squares. The way that white played it was fine as well, though. Rook d1, c3, knight d4 to trade knights, a3 to kind of freeze up the queen side, and for the most part, the remainder of the game was just white kind of you know, pushing his pawns a little bit, gaining extra space. Black played the move knight e7. White traded rooks here. Now there is some tactical stuff that happens right down the road here that kind of messes white up a little bit. But for the most part, white should be winning this pretty simply, as long as white doesn't make any big blunders here. King f2, king c4, king e2, king d3. Rook to d2 to protect the pawn. Black played knight e7, king d3, knight c8, king d4, knight d6. And now we have to, again, be a little careful here. White, in general, white's doing great here. White is definitely in a better position. Black, though, is looking to improve. Maybe knight c4, hit the rook and the pawn and stuff like that. But white is definitely better in this position. There are two moves, actually, that we have to watch out for here. And unfortunately, in the game, white did play one of them. What are two moves? I guess there's actually three moves. What are some moves that we should avoid in this position? What are some things we should not play in this position due to some tactical stuff? It's all about these tricky knights, or in this case, one tricky knight. So this knight on d6 is, we have to be very careful. Knights are always very tricky in the endgame, especially with all the forks they can do, and they can move over, you know, they can jump pawns, they can be on both light and dark squares. So knights are definitely one of the trickier pieces in the endgame. So we can't really move the king to any of these three squares, because there's going to be a knight fork on all three of these. Any one of these three moves we make, there's going to be a knight fork. You were about to play king c5, but I realized he could fork my king and rook, so I automatically played king e5, and as soon as you saw it, he could still fork on that same square as well. Yeah, you have a good idea. In general, moving the king forward is what you should do. You just have to deal with the fork stuff first. So instead of moving the king forward immediately, how can we kind of prevent the fork ahead of time? What's maybe a move we make here to avoid the fork from happening? Or not let it, you know, happen? Yep, jumping Jackson, that's a perfectly good move. Rook e2, probably the safest move here. We do want to still keep the king moving forward, but I think moving the rook off of d2 would be perfectly... Rook e2 is probably the best move here for sure. Get the rook off of the d2 square. Now when we move the king forward, there's no forks because the rook is on e2. This is a little, I guess, a little principle to keep in mind. A knight can only fork pieces that are on the same square. A knight can only fork pieces on the same, or the same color square, sorry, on the same color square. A knight cannot fork a piece on a dark square and then a piece on a light square. So one thing in these situations is, you know, if we're dealing with going against a knight, try to keep your last two pieces on opposite color squares. So keep the rook on a light square and keep the king on a dark square, maybe. Yeah, keep the king and the rook on opposite colors. Yep. So in this case, you know, he can check our king, but then we'll just move forward and pick up one of the pawns. Or we can go to e5 and pick up that pawn. He can play knight c4 and go after our b2 pawn, which is probably the best move. But we can play, you know, rook takes e6, he takes b2, rook takes g6, he takes a3. We can probably just play f5 and he's not able to catch our pawn in time. He tries to move his king and push his pawn forward. We just go over here real quick to get behind the pawn. a3, take that pawn if we want to. f6, and he can't catch the pawn here. Knight moves here. You know, knight moves. We promote, and the game is over at that point. So the main thing I would say here is just, you know, in a case like this, it is kind of a specific situation. Don't always follow that rule blindly. But if you're wanting to avoid pieces getting forked, you have to have them on opposite color squares. In this case, when we go to e5 or c5 or e3, those are all dark colored squares, just like the rook is on a dark colored square. So you're prone to possibly getting forked. And that's how the game went. King e5, knight c4 check, and white ends up resigning because black's going to pick up the rook and then get the b2 pawn and stuff like that. So you played very well on the dark horse. I think a lot of what you did was very good throughout the game. I like your plan of attacking on the king side. I like the knight route you did. We also talked about the queen d2, bishop h6 idea as well. I do think maybe you could have played f6 a little bit sooner. As soon as black played, where'd it go? As soon as black did not take the pawn back on f5, you could play f6 right away. But other than that, I think you played the game pretty well. And I don't really think... it just kind of comes down to that mistake at the end game, unfortunately. So, very well played game, though. And definitely fits our topic of talking about creating a plan, building an attack, creating a plan of attacking, building that attack, and then once you get the material lead, then you kind of go forward from there. Okay, so let's go ahead and move on to our next game. This is actually going to be a game that one of my own students played. One of my own, like, one-on-one private students. Let's check this game out here, because I think it does have some good themes of how to play in the end game and improving your piece activity and stuff like that. So I'm going to kind of fast forward through this game a little bit. I do have a couple of specific positions I want to focus on. For the most part, the game goes fairly normally. It was a French defense. White went for the exchange on d5. Both sides are developing pieces. Black throws in a check. Actually, we're looking at this from White's point of view, sorry. There's a trade on f3. And we get around to, kind of this in-game here. In this particular game, the players' ratings are... My student is around 1,200-ish. I actually don't know the exact number off the top of my head. I'd have to look it up real quick. But I think it's around 1,200-ish. And I think his opponent's about the same thing. So the first game was about 1,000-ish. The second game is about 1,200. As the games go along, they're going to increase in difficulty a little bit. I didn't really plan it that way, but that's actually how it does look like it's going to go. Okay, so we have this endgame here. What is going on in this endgame? I wouldn't really say it's not far into the endgame. The game's actually only on move 12, but there has been a piece exchange. There has been a queen exchange. It's kind of like a queenless middle game, I suppose, but essentially there's not, a lot of the principles of the endgame are going to kind of happen here. So what's kind of going on in this position? What's the differences between white and black? What's good for white? What's good for black? Stuff like that. And how might you look to play if you're in white shoes? And also we'll talk about maybe what black should be looking to do. I do believe there are a couple of specific things white should accomplish and a couple of things that black wants to accomplish at the same time. So Amadorkor says white has the bishop pair. Absolutely correct. Black did trade off the bishop on f3 a couple moves ago. So we do have the bishop pair, which is nice for us. And the game is more open. It's not wide open, but it's definitely not closed. That's 100%. 100% true. There's half-open files available. There's pretty open diagonals to use. Decent looking position for the bishops to be in. Black does definitely have the better pawn structure. You are correct, Timothy. White does have doubled isolated f-pawns and an isolated h-pawn. So white's pawn structure, not looking so great. But he has the bishop pair that maybe makes up for it a little bit. So this endgame is going to be focused around the idea of using our piece activity and avoiding trading pieces when it's good. Because the longer the game goes on, the worse it's going to be for white. If you imagine somehow all the pieces come off the board. Let me actually show you that. Let me show you what it will look like. Let's imagine all the pieces come off the board. Aside from the kings, of course. Something like this, for example. If all the pieces come off the board, how do you think this endgame is? How do you think this king and pawn endgame is? Good for white, good for black. What do you think? This is clearly better for black, right? The pawn structure is really what hurts white quite a bit. I'm not 100% sure. I mean, if I turn the engine on, it says it's like -1 for black. That's actually not as big of an advantage as I was expecting it to be. But it's definitely a better position for black. It's going to be much harder for white to win. I don't know if I would say it's drawn. I don't know if I would say it's winning for black, but black has the advantage for sure. There's no doubt about that. Black might try to work his king over to attack the pawns, maybe work all the way to h3 or g2 to attack the kingside pawns. This should be better for black. Again, though, let's put the actual game back on the board. Right here. So the main thing is white wants to use his piece activity because he does have better pieces, but he wants to make sure in the process that he's not trading off pieces and getting into the king and pawn, or going too far into the endgame where his pawn structure is really going to hurt him. So that's the big thing here. Now we're going to see how some of what white does is not the best, but there are some things that black also messes up as well. So white here first, my student, he first played bishop h3, which I think is a pretty good move. Makes a pin, active piece, active diagonal for the bishop. Black played king b8, getting out of the pin. White played rook g1, so notice white's making some threats with his moves. In this case, rook g1 threatening the g7 pawn. Black played g6. And now white decided to play bishop g5. Bishop g5 is okay, but what ends up happening in the next couple of moves here could be a little bit of a problem for white. Black played h6. Now, quick question here. Do you think that white wants to trade the pieces here? Do you think white wants to trade the bishop for the knight here? Do you think that would be a good idea for white? Okay, so it's a good thing you guys all have the right idea. This would definitely not be a good trade. If we take, black takes back with the knight, and we haven't accomplished anything. If anything, now we're worse here, right? We just trade off one of our good bishops. We still have the bad pawn structure, so trades we should typically be avoiding here. The tricky thing is, though, a lot of people here, they understand that they shouldn't trade at this point. Bishop h3 is the pin to win a move, yeah. Yeah, bishop h3 was fine, but black did play king b8 to get out of the pin. Now, a lot of people understand that you shouldn't trade the bishop for knight here, right? We all agree on that. But part of the thinking here that I kind of talked to my student about a little bit is, why are you playing bishop g5 if you're not going to take the knight? You are making a pin, but look what happens in the next few moves, right? Black played h6. If we're not going to take the knight, we're moving the bishop. Bishop h4, black played g5, bishop g3, and black does play knight h5 pretty quickly, KTM. You have the right idea there for sure. He plays knight h5 like a couple moves later. If anything, though, notice how the bishop is on this good diagonal. We could have just played bishop f4 right away, maybe. Now, I guess black does have knight h5 still. Maybe that's still a little bit annoying. But I think really what we should do from the start is probably just play on the e-file. I talked to my student about that a little bit as well. If we just play on the e-file, if we play rook e1, double up the rooks, stuff like that, I think white's got a pretty good position there. Rook e1, bishop d6. Actually, moves like knight b5 are kind of interesting. Black gets the pawn, but he's going to have to give the bishop up on d6. Now it's actually black with the bad pawn structure. White's down a pawn, but notice, an example like this, we got the bishop pair, we got a rook on the 7th rank, our bishops are pretty good. That might be a better position for white, actually. Even though we're down a pawn, these pieces are very active here. So, that might be something that's playable. But in the game, the bishop got all the way back around to g3, and black does play knight h5 a few moves later. Black played a6 first to stop knight b5, and now white played rook e1. Black played rook e8. From here, what do you think white should be doing? The bishops are nice for white. I would say there's kind of two main plans I might consider here. Two main plans I might come up with. Let's see here. Knight h5 might not be so bad since it would fix white's pawn structure. That does actually happen a little later, Ariel. Ariel was taken. So that's going to factor in for sure in this game. I do agree with you, though. F4 is a couple of suggestions here. When you want to double up the rooks, does it really matter how far up you move the first rook, other than avoiding captures and risk? Is there anything else one should be thinking of? I'll kind of talk about that here, because doubling the rooks does make perfect sense. That is one of the main plans I would go for. I think you guys have kind of talked about the two different plans here. F4 is a possibility in order to trade pawns, right? We want to trade pawns because we have the bishop pair. We want to try to also exchange off one of our bad pawns, one of the double pawns. So F4 is a reasonable plan, and doubling up the rooks on the E file also makes perfect sense. Now, F4 right away might be a little tricky, because I do agree, KTM is saying maybe G4 is good for black. We got to move the bishop back. This pawn is blocking the bishop now. So maybe not F4 right away, but maybe F4, a little bit down the road might be an idea. I do think, though, in this particular position, I would probably work toward doubling the rooks up. Now, Rodolfo asks, does it matter where I put the rook if I'm going to double up here? Because in this position, there's a couple ways you can double up. You could play rook e2 and then rook e1. You could do rook e3 and rook e1. You could do rook d2 and then e2. Or you could do d3 and e3, right? There's like 4 different ways you can double up the rooks here. There are some considerations, I would say, just to be a little bit careful about. This kind of also goes back to that previous game we looked at where you have to watch out for certain forks by putting your pieces on certain squares. So I think a move like rook e2, I like the rooks being on e2 and e1 here personally. I'd be a little careful about e3, putting one of the rooks on e3 here. Mainly because, not that it's really going to happen right now, but there might be like bishop g5 ideas in the future. It's not going to happen right now, of course, but, you'd have to always be a little bit careful. You'd have to be a little careful that that might happen. So I do think here that rook e2 and then rook e1 is probably the best route. Let's say, for example, Black could actually get in a lot of trouble here if he's not careful. If Black plays something like, some waiting move, I don't know, b6 or something like that, Black is actually just lost here. We double the rooks up. We're attacking the bishop. Let's say the bishop moves away, gets off the pin. How does White proceed from here? How does White proceed from this position? And Ariel was taking rerouting the knight to f5. That also comes into play a little later as well. So you guys have a lot of the right ideas for what I was kind of suggesting to my student as we looked at this game together. You guys are on the ball with that, which is really great to see. Okay, rook takes rook. He can exchange rooks. Then the d5 pawn falls eventually. Bishop takes knight, taking on d5. So you have to be a bit precise here with the move order, is the important thing. You guys are seeing a lot of the right moves, but you have to be precise with the move order. The best move order is to play rook takes e8 first. You take the rook. If he takes back with the rook, you just trade rooks again. And then you just take on d7 and you win a piece. Right? So that's winning. If he takes back with the knight here instead, well, then you can take d7 here, and the rook cannot protect both the knights at the same time. Now, the problem with some of the other move orders is, if we take on d7 first, if we take here first, we're thinking, okay, he'll take back, and then we'll take the rook. What can Black do here after bishop takes d7? Yeah, he can take on e2 first, exactly. Rook takes e2, we take back on e2, then he takes d7, and he's doing perfectly fine here. Again, this would actually be bad for us in the long run because we've traded off a piece for essentially a knight. We trade off the bishop for the knight, and the pawn structure is still better for Black. So if anything, this is helping Black by doing this, this tactic incorrectly. Whenever you're looking to do move orders with tactics, you always have to consider your opponent's responses. If we take d7, Black has 2 options of captures. Two different pieces he can capture. If we take e8, he only has 1 piece he can capture. He can capture it 2 different ways, but only 1 piece to capture. So rook takes e8 is the best first move here. Knight takes d5 also doesn't work due to, again, I think Black just takes on e2 first. I guess we can throw in bishop takes c7, stuff like that, but it gets kind of messy here. King c8, we take the rook, he takes the knight, take. I mean, I don't even think this is... Black has 2 knights for the rook, which is not that bad, actually. in this kind of position. So whenever you're looking to make tactics, give your opponent the fewest amount of options as possible. So I do think, though, at the end of the day, white should look to double up the rooks, and then that black would be under some trouble. Pretty much black would have to play like knight b6 really quickly here. We double up. Then he plays bishop f8. Now there's no knight on d7. Even here, though, let's actually consider this. We've doubled up and black played bishop f8. What do you think white should do here? Do you take on e8? Do you do something different? Do you play f4? What do you do here? What do you think? And again, it really boils down to what we talked about earlier with the long run. Do we want to get farther into the endgame or not? What would you do if you're in white shoes? Okay. Bishop takes c7, catches black off guard. I think you're talking about the previous move order, maybe. Right now, bishop takes c7 wouldn't do much, though. Don't trade. Bishop e5, don't trade. Okay, good. So we don't want to trade. And this is, again, in general. If we trade, if we trade all the pieces, I guess we do have f4. That is true, KTM. That is true. However, like after f4, I mean, we're missing, our rooks were better. We traded off 2 good rooks for what ends up being kind of a passive d8 rook and a, kind of a 1.5 pieces in a way. But we do get to play f4. I think, though, we should avoid the rook trade. I think playing bishop e5 would be the best move. Now, there's things black has to watch out for after bishop e5. Let's say that black plays, well, obviously we're going to take the knight if he's not careful. Let's say black plays knight d7, moving the knight away and hitting our bishop. What do we do from here? Now there's bishop takes c7 ideas. There you go. Now, because the knight's not protecting the rook, now there's tactics of playing bishop takes c7, discovered attack on the rook, and we would win the exchange and a pawn, actually. We'd be very happy there. Bishop takes, king takes, rook takes, rook takes, rook takes. White's definitely winning this position. Up a pawn, up the exchange. Very, very good position for white. So, if this is what happened in the game, black would not be able to play knight d7. He actually can't move the knight. If he moves the knight, we're still going to take c7. So black should play like bishop g7 here to guard the knight. This way, the knight is still protecting the rook. But the thing is, now we might be able to play f4. Or maybe we throw in b3 first. Maybe b3 to stop this knight from going to c4. And then we play f4 after that. Or maybe f4 right away. Something like this looks like a more reasonable continuation for us. We're avoiding piece trades, and we're trading off our bad pawn, and keeping our pieces more active at the same time. This is just like a overall benefit for us here, for sure. What rating were the players? Both in the 1200-ish range. Around 1200. I don't have the specific numbers here, but in the 1200 range. What about bishop takes f6? Oops, let me get back to that. Bishop e5, bishop g7. Bishop takes f6. The downside here is black is still going to take that rook on e2. He'll trade on e2 first, then take back on f6. So we take, he takes, and we haven't won material, so the trade is still a net negative for us at this point. So that's what we'd have to watch out for here. But I do think, after bishop e5, bishop g7, f4, or b3 first, then f4, I think white's doing pretty well. Overall, white's just working towards improving his position. Now, in the actual game here, white did not double the rooks up. White actually, in the game, played bishop takes d7. And as we've kind of talked about why this wouldn't be a good thing to do, black simply took back, and this was just kind of a non-beneficial trade for white here. Now, white's not losing, but it's not a trade that really did anything for him. White now plays bishop e5, threatening to take the knight because this bishop would be pinned. Black plays knight h5. Rook e2, f6, bishop to g3. Now, a question for black here. Do you think that black should trade off the knight for the bishop? Do you think that black should take the bishop? No? Yep. Alright, so yeah, yes, a no, no. That makes his pawns better. No, that'll just fix his pawn structure. No. I agree. Black in the game did actually take the bishop. And that was definitely not a good move for black to play. That actually helps out white significantly here. What black should do instead, I think, is probably just play like... probably just move the rook away. Maybe rook c8. Actually, no, we can't play rook c8 because the knight takes d5. Maybe something like... Maybe knight g7. Knight g7 to f5. Maybe attack the d4 pawn a little bit. White doubles up. Black plays knight f5, guarding the bishop. Then he can move the rook. And then he can move the bishop. Pretty much, though, I don't think black should be looking to trade because it's going to help white's pawn structure. And if anything, you know, black does want to trade in general. That is still true. But he wants to trade in a situation where it's going to benefit him. F5 with F4 ideas? Could try F5, I guess. I guess white would play bishop E5 here, avoiding the trap bishop. But yeah, this might be playable as well. Maybe now, you know, move the king over, stuff like that. Might be playable. In the game, though, as we're going to see, black took on G3, which is definitely not a good move here. White took back with the F4, the F2 pawn, fixed his pawn structure, and now we're going to see kind of the next step in the plan here. Rook E6 hitting the C6 pawn, king C7. Okay, so this is kind of the final plan we have to come up with, I would say, in this position. Maybe not final plan, but in relation to the way the game went. So we have these great rooks. They're absolutely terrific. It's white's move right now. What would you do if you're in white's shoes? Or what would be your plan? Or maybe, you know, next move you do or something like that? Yeah, this is definitely great for white now. Absolutely correct. Get a knight to c5. That would be great. If we can get the knight to c5, that would be absolutely terrific. Getting a knight on f5 would also be very good as well. So essentially an outpost. We want to improve the knight. Our two rooks are great already. Those rooks don't need to be improved here. We need to get the knight to a better square. And also our king, you know, maybe a little later the king goes to d3 or something like that. But mainly the knight, I would say, at this point. So in order to... The way you want to think in this kind of position is you take the knight, which is not doing a ton on c3. You look at the knight and you say, okay, if I could teleport my knight somewhere, where would I like the knight to be? As long as it's a reasonable square. Don't say like a7 or something. That's just not going to happen. We would like the knight on c5 or f5. Then we start thinking, kind of working our way backwards. Okay, I want the knight on f5 or c5. How do I get the knight to that square? It would have to come from e3, or it would have to come from something like b3 or d3. So then we think, okay, how does the knight get to one of these three squares? Well, to get to b3, it would have to come from d2. So maybe a plan might be like knight b1 to d2 to b3 to c5. That's a little bit of a long-winded plan. But really, what is black going to do in the meantime? His pieces are completely jumbled up. So that might be a route for getting the knight to the c5 square. Other routes that work are things like knight d1 to f2 to d3 to c5. And if you're wanting to go for f5, knight d1 to e3 to f5. Personally, I like the f5 square the best, mainly because it is on a color opposite the bishop, so I don't ever have to worry about the bishop taking it. It is also a little quicker to get the knight to f5. It's only 3 moves compared to c5 being 4 moves. And thirdly, the knight on c5, or sorry, the knight on f5 is attacking more stuff, I would say. It's attacking a pinned bishop and a pawn. c5 attacks the rook and the pawn, but I mean, getting there is going to be a little bit longer routed. So for example, if we try to go knight a2, which I think some people were suggesting here, knight a2 to b4, maybe to d3, or also simply attacking those pawns. If we go knight a2, black just plays a5. And the knight doesn't really have a great place to go, you know, to help on that journey. You'd have to now move the king, then to c1, d3, c5. It's a lot of knight moving and king moving stuff here. Personally, I think the simplest route, I know this is a lot of arrows here, but I think the simplest route and probably the best route is simply to go for knight d1, black does whatever, knight e3, and knight f5. That looks very straightforward to me. And again, black can't really untangle here easily. If he moves the rook, we take the bishop. If he moves the other rook, we take the bishop. If he moves the king, he has to keep c6 protected. So if he goes there, I'll just take c6. So in the meantime, we're just going to play knight e3, knight f5, attack the bishop, hit the pawn, have a nice position. Now, one thing that I don't think anybody has noticed here, I don't think I've seen anybody in the chat box mentioning it, we have the ability to play rook takes f6. Rook takes f6 picks up a pawn, or at least it looks like it picks up a pawn due to the pinned bishop here. Do you think that rook takes f6 is a good move? Do you think rook takes f6 is a good move here? How do you punish black that pushes pawns in this position? Not always easy to punish, but we can really see how black's pawn moves have opened up those weak squares. So the way you punish the opponent by making if they make a bunch of pawn moves is you take advantage of those squares they're no longer protecting. Because black made all these pawn moves earlier, he's now weakening c5 and f5, and we're looking to use those squares. Okay, so rook takes f6 looks like it wins the pawn, but it doesn't actually win a pawn here. Black can play bishop takes f6, we take the rook, and he gets d4. Now, this entire series of trades, we've essentially traded a rook for a rook and then a pawn for a pawn. This would be, is this good for white or good for black? Does this help white or black more in this situation? It's not really a pawn loss because we did pick up f6 and he got d4. But at the end of the day, is this good for white or good for black, this series of trades? Does this help him more or help us more? Okay, so this makes it better for black. This opens the position up a bit more. The pawn trade does open the position, and black does have the bishop. And also, we had, again, 2 active rooks. And now we only have, now we would only have 1 active rook. So you're trading off your activity, you're giving your opponent more activity, and you're not even winning material in the process. So if anything, this would actually help out black a little bit. I'm not saying black is winning or anything like that, but white was better, and now it's more equal, I would say. So white did not take on f6, but white should play the knight d1, e3, f5 route. I think that is the best way to play. In the game, white played a4, which kind of makes sense. If he takes the pawn, you'll take back and go to c5, so I can understand the move a4. Black played f5, though. There was a trade of pawns. And now white played knight a2. He wants to go to b4, d3, and then one of these 2 squares. So again, this is kind of a move you guys mentioned earlier. So white here, my student, was trying to reroute the knight. I do think, though, that d1, e3, f5 was a little better. He could have still done knight d1, e3, and hit the f5 pawn, for example. But after knight a2, black played g4. Black played g4 here. What do you think we should do? Okay, we definitely should play f4 here. We should definitely keep everything locked up at this point. Pick up the pawn. We could pick up h6, but we can't take h6 here because bishop g5 is going to be a check, and everything is hit. Yeah, we can't pick up a pawn in this case. Bishop g5 is going to be the big problem with that right now. But we could play f4. Now, let's imagine, I don't know, let's say black plays h5, right? Let's say he just plays h5. Now, white is better here, but, let's say white tries to continue, or he thinks that he can continue with his knight b4 idea, right? Because knight b4 looks good. Hits c6, goes to d3, and goes into better squares. And it looks like, if we play knight b4, black is going to have to, defend the pawn. If we do play knight b4, though, what's black's best defense in this position? What is black's best defense here? He can actually take b4 in this case. Yep, even though the bishop's pinned, he can take on b4 because he's hitting the rook on e1. So this actually would not be good for white. If anything, I mean, white is probably still a little bit better here for sure. But we, again, just trade off all of our active pieces, and black has kind of caught up quite a bit. So we still can't play knight b4 anyways. So what white should do from this position is probably like, you know, king b1, c1, d3. We want to get the knight to d3 and then into c5, but we can't go through the b4 square. Or maybe we can play rook e2 and then knight b4. That way there's no rook on e1 being hit. I agree. That is why the knight d1, e3, f5 plan was better. Yep, definitely correct. I agree with that for sure. Now in the game, white played pawn takes g4. I'm not a big fan of this move though, because it now allows black to make the check, trade off a pair of rooks, take back on g4. White is still doing okay here, but again, black has caught up in that activity department quite a bit. Knight to b4 to hit the pawn, rook d6. And they ended up agreeing to a draw in a moment. White made a perpetual check. Knight a6 check, knight c5 check, knight a6, knight c5. And they agreed to a draw after the threefold repetition here. Now, I think it's more of an even position at this point. So I think at the end of the day, a draw here is not a horrible situation. But white definitely had the better position earlier. We talked about how we can use our piece activity, try not to trade off our active pieces, try to get our knights or pieces to better squares. Yeah, I'm not saying this is a draw, but I think given how the game went and how white had the advantage earlier, it's a whole lot more equal now, and maybe, you know, it's more drawish than it was earlier for sure. I do think at the end of the day, though, that white going for the perpetual check is not... It makes sense now, but comparing to what we had earlier, it's not, you know, obviously we're not that happy. So, from this game, the main thing we see is if you get into some kind of position where you have better piece activity, you have better pieces, even if you have a long-term disadvantage, like the bad pawn structure we had, you still want to try to keep those active pieces on the board, try to create threats, try to, you know, get more activity, attack your opponent's weaknesses. Make sure that you're not trading pieces, though, and when it's in a situation that's going to benefit the opponent or allow them to catch up. That was kind of the downfall of white in this game. He traded off some pieces that allowed black to kind of catch up in the position, and ultimately it becomes more of a drawish situation at this point. So that's how this particular game went. I think I said that black was rated around 1200 earlier. My student's 1200. But I think black was actually like 1400, and my student told me he went for the perpetual check because he wanted, you know, he thought the opponent was higher rated and he could get the draw. So actually, now that I'm thinking back on the story behind this game, black was actually, I think, about 1400. So my student played pretty well, but probably could have gotten the win but he got the draw instead. Hey, Mikey Slice, thanks a lot for the host. Really appreciate the 18 viewers. Thank you very much. Okay, so we have one final game to look at. And I want to go over this game for sure. And let's see what's going on in this one. Now, this game is, yeah, thanks a lot. Hope you have a good day as well. So this game is actually not one of my students' games. This is actually one of my own games. And the reason we're going over this is a little bit of a, I guess we have a little bit of a promotion, I guess, to give away. Not really giveaway, but a little bit of a promotional offer during the stream here in regards to a video I'll talk about a little bit later. But this game here was actually one that I played against an international master, and the focus of this game is going to be on kind of the opening, but also connecting with how you can have a material deficit coming out of the opening, but you can have good, again, piece activity and pressure on the opponent and stuff like that. So this particular game comes out of the Binko Gambit. And the reason I'm kind of focusing on this game again is because we actually have a little bit of an offer here. I'm going to put it in the chat box real quick. I created a video course for one of our new kind of chess websites, chessvl.com. Which is a site that's kind of dedicated to selling chess videos compared to doing live courses, which we've done a little bit more in the past. I'm going to put this link in the chat box, though. This is a link to a video course that has a 33% discount, and it's a video course that focuses on the opening that we're going to see in this game. So I'm going to put that in there. I'm going to put it again in a little bit later. But this is just, this game is one I wanted to show anyways, but it does kind of tie in with the a recent video that I created for this website. So let's kind of go through the opening. It is the Binko Gambit. And the Binko Gambit goes with the move b5, and the idea behind this opening is that black essentially gives up a pawn, and he's going to get active play against the opponent's queen side here. So let's kind of fast forward through the opening a little bit. And if you want to know more about this opening, that video course does definitely delve into it. And there's also, if you click on that link, the first video on there is completely free. It's like a 15-minute video overviewing this opening. So even if you don't want to, even if you just watch that video, that'll help you out for sure. So at this point, we're going to kind of just get through the opening a little bit here. And we're around to this position. Okay, so it's move 13. And if anybody knows this opening whatsoever, you might have some ideas of things to work towards here. So in this position, it's black's move. Black is down a pawn, but black is going to have a lot of pressure on the queen side. Bishop is in this direction. Rook and queen are both on the queen side. Black will probably play rook b8 pretty soon to also be on the queen side. So black is down a pawn, but has a lot of pressure on the opponent's position. I'm just going to kind of show how this game went a little bit and talk about how understanding the ideas behind the opening can help you to play well in these situations. Plus, I also think the in-game position is very instructive as well. So I played rook to b8. Black played rook a3, trying to support his knight and get off of this diagonal, which is a reasonable move. Knight e8, knight d2, knight c7, knight c4, queen a6, kind of pinning the knight a bit. Rook to b4 maybe as a threat to attack the pinned knight. Bishop d2, I played knight b6 to hit the knight. And what ends up happening is we get into this endgame right around here. So black is still down a pawn, and I'm actually okay with going into the endgame. But the whole idea behind this opening is I have targets, I have things I'm attacking, and white, the only benefit for him is the extra pawn that's a bit of a pass pawn. Through some tactics that we'll see in a moment, I am able to regain this pawn. Rook a5 to blockade it, knight a8, and then knight b6 to attack the pawn again. And white now plays knight to b3, attacking my rook on a5. So in black's shoes here, what do you think that black should do at this point? White has just played knight b3 attacking my rook. What do you think we should do as black here? Knight c4. Knight c4, he takes our rook. We take his rook. He takes back. We're actually down a piece at that point. So knight c4, unfortunately, doesn't work. If we simply retreat the rook, his idea is to play probably a5. Well, actually, maybe not a5 yet. Actually, I guess knight c4 is a threat. Maybe he'd have to move his knight back or something like that. But we do have a way to immediately win a pawn. We were down a pawn, now we can play the move rook takes a4, and we can regain a pawn. So the problem is this rook is protecting both the knight and the a4 pawn. Rook takes, knight takes, rook takes, rook takes, and we got our pawn back at this point. So black is not even down material, and black has weaknesses and targets, and a more active rook compared to white. Now white played rook c4 to protect this pawn. Pretty much the only way to guard it. And now I would argue here that black is completely winning. I'll kind of argue that here. Black is completely winning here. It actually takes the computer a little bit to figure out why black is winning. What yellow range is this lesson? Quite a big, it's a big difference between those two earlier examples and this one. This one is like, well, I'm 2300 rated. My opponent was an international master. So, 22 to 2400 rated was the players. But you don't need to be that high of a rating to understand what's going on here. So I would argue that black is completely winning here. And it doesn't seem obvious why that is. Black has better activity, that's true, but you might not think it's enough to win here. There are some important there are some big problem. There is a big problem in White's position here. Actually, I guess let's fast forward one more move. Okay, so there's a big problem in White's position here. I played f6, White played king e3, now there's a big problem. What is the issue in White's position? What is not very good for White at this point? There are a number of things that are bad, but there's kind of one particular bad thing that stands out here. Okay, the rook activity is a big thing. The rook is stuck. Horiel's got it there. The rook is stuck. The rook is completely frozen here. If he moves away, we'll take c3, of course. But if anything, we can actually stop the rook from moving, period. I played the move rook a3 here, and now the rook is completely stuck. The only way this rook is ever going to get to move, he'll have to play e5 and sacrifice a pawn. He'll have to play e5, I'll take it, and I'll win a pawn for free. Now that the rook is stuck, after I play rook a3, he can't come back to a4. The plan for black is pretty straightforward here. My simple plan at this point was to play king f7, king e8, king d7, c7, b6, b5. I want to go attack the rook. White will have to go play king d3 to protect it, and then I can just go check the king pretty much. I can play rook a1, rook d1. I can kind of push the king away or put white in zugzwang, and I'm just going to look to win the win the rook where it's stuck on this c4 square. Now, White kind of realized this. He played the move f4. He wants to play e5 to open up the rook a bit. I played king f7. He played e5. How do we keep the rook stuck there, though? How do you think we should play after White plays e5 here? Okay, we play f5. There you go. We definitely do not want to take the pawn. If we play like pawn takes, well, now the rook has mobility. This is a lot more drawish at this point. But if we play f5, the rook is still stuck. The rook can't move to any of these squares here. f5 completely locks the rook up, and my plan is simply to walk the king over and attack it. White played h3. I played h5. Not really a necessary move, but I played it anyways. King f3, king e8. White played g4. I still don't want to trade pawns because I don't want to free up space for the rook. I don't want to do this because then he can play f5 and get the rook out. So I simply played h4. He played g5. Everything is completely locked up over here. And I simply continue with my king route. Just going to walk the king over and hit the rook. King e3, king c7, king d3, king b6, king c2, king b5. Now he played king b2 attacking my rook. There's a number of ways to win from here. I simply took the rook. I don't actually win material. Well, I guess I win a pawn. I don't win a full rook, but I took the rook, took on c3. Black is completely lost here, all because I'm up a pawn and he can't stop me from, promoting the c-pawn here pretty soon. So I thought that was an interesting game just kind of to add in here at the end, especially because I thought the endgame position was pretty funny. Kind of not every day you see a piece trapped in the center of the board, or pretty close to it. But really, the idea was, my understanding of the opening, the Binko Gambit, kind of got to an in-game position where I was down a pawn, but I had a lot of pressure on White's position. He made a mistake. I was able to get a pawn back, and we end up having the better in-game, and we end up winning the game here. Am I working towards becoming an IM? Slowly but surely. Where I live does not have a ton of tournaments, or at least not very many norm tournaments, unfortunately. I live in Florida, not in Miami, where there are probably more norm tournaments. But I'm working on traveling a bit more to get to some bigger tournaments a little later this year and next year, hopefully. Could he have played king b2 earlier on before the king reached b5? I don't believe so. I think he would have not been in time. Well, okay, let's see. Maybe you're talking about king here and get to b2 quicker. I think I can just check him. How do I put it? This is still winning for black. I think black just plays like... Well, I mean, first of all, no matter what, if he goes to the second rank, I always have check and take h2, which is going to give me the advantage. I might not trap the rook, but I'm going to have an extra pawn, for example. Maybe a little more precise for myself would have been like rook a2 here, stopping him from getting his king over. And then the rook is still trapped. That might have been a bit more precise. You know, king here, here. He runs out of moves. He can't even move the king back. So maybe I had a little bit more precise way to play. But at the end of the day, we did end up trapping the rook, and we won the king and pawn in game at this point. Where would I look for tournaments, especially in Florida? Orlando's pretty good, right in the center of the state, which is more in the area of where I live. It's pretty good, but there's not many norm tournaments, which makes the International Master title a little hard to get. But Central Florida is pretty good for that. But of course, you can always just Google Florida chess. Miami would be good as well, for sure. Anyways, though, let me put this link in here one more time, just for anybody who's interested. Again, that's just a link to a video course that I created talking more about the Binko Gambit. And that'll help you to understand that opening a bit more and how to play as white or as black if you're playing with the opening or against the opening. White probably could have played a little bit better, but I think anytime that he gets closer with the king, if he tries to get too close with the king, I can always check and go pick up the kingside pawns. That's kind of the tricky part for him. It's not even just about trapping the rook. If he starts moving the king over too quickly, I can always play, you know, check, rook here, and pick up these guys, which he has to be a bit careful about. Where did White go wrong in this particular game? I think when he lost the a4 pawn, knight b3 was a mistake that allowed me to take here and then win my pawn back. He should have done something different here. But again, he kind of allowed me a lot of activity. It's kind of a more even-ish in game, but he definitely made some mistakes along the way. Yeah, that video course is perfect for, I would say, like, any rating up through, like, 1500. It's really good for anybody that just wants to understand the basic ideas of the opening. It's 4 videos. The first video is an overview of the opening in general and kind of looking at 2 games. The second video is about how to play the opening as black. The third video is about how to play the opening as white. And then the fourth video is, like, some tactics that are involved in the opening and some patterns and stuff like that. Is there a way to sign up for all the opening courses at the same time, or does one need to sign up for each course individually? Send me an email about that. I think there is a way to bundle them, but I have to double check. Send me an email at dalton@chessuniversity.com, Rodolfo, and I'll double check that for you. Let me know, you know, just send me your email with your email address or something, and I'll double check for you. Okay, so that's it for this, you know, seminar, couple of game analysis kind of stream here today. Hopefully you guys have enjoyed it. I enjoyed going over the different examples here. Hopefully you guys were able to benefit from them. And hopefully I'll be back again with another kind of, you know, afternoon stream in the near future. Once again, if you're interested in more things regarding Chess University, we have our own website, chessuniversity.com. We have different live programs on the weekends. We have our Prodigy program. ChessVL.com is where we're putting a lot more of the kind of one-off videos and video courses, and ChessUniversity.com is where more of the live stuff is going to be focused on. Oh, you're very welcome, I'm a Dark Horse. Thanks for submitting the game. Really enjoyed that game to look at. Okay, so hope you guys have a good rest of the day. I've enjoyed talking with you guys here. I will see you guys around in the future, and that's it. All right, guys, have a good afternoon. See you later. Bye-bye.